brother, if our children knew all of just a portion of what you just said about us, I think they will have the esteem that we keep trying to give them. But it goes back to what you're saying. If you don't know your history, you don't know who you are.
Yes.
And if I can tell you who you are, whatever I want to tell you to make myself look good.
Yes.
And if you believe that's who you are, then you act accordingly. And it's just really sad. That is so interesting. You mentioned the 4th of July. And as you were talking, I thought about an incident in my family. We were living in North Carolina and Fayetteville, and my aunt was living in Ohio, or maybe Philly at the time. Anyway, it was 4th of July time, and she came down, and my mother had these little stick flags. And I was a little kid, so I didn't get the meaning of everything. But I remember my aunt came in there and said, "Why do you have these flags in your house?" And she snatched those flags and she said, "The way they treat us, we don't celebrate the 4th of July." And I was standing there like a little kid because I didn't understand everything. And my mother didn't get angry. It was like a conversation between them two. But how do you feel when some blacks feel like they shouldn't celebrate 4th of July?
Well, I look at it to each his own. I choose not to myself because I know the real meaning of the 4th of July Day.
You lie. Yeah, we got to have you back.
Yeah. And the reason why I call it 4th of July, because Frederick Douglass called it 4th of July. Okay. Nat Turner called it 4th of July. Harriet Tubman called it 4th of July. Okay. So if they called it that many years ago, and they lived in a different America than I live in today, but the same problems persist in my day and are getting worse than in her day. You know, people don't even realize that. It was one thing to be called out and said the N-word because it was so common. Most folks probably thought it was their name. Okay. You know, so back then, you've heard it so often. You hear it every day. A person call you the N-word, that it is stuck in your mind. It don't even bother you no more. Okay. Back then, those slaves didn't get mad because what? They knew they get beaten, shot, hung, killed, whipped, you know, if they say something about it. But today, because we have laws supposedly saying that you can't say all these inflammatory words, but people still find ways to belittle you with other words. They may not use the N-word, but they say, "Oh, he's so well spoken," like Obama. He's so articulate. Okay. All right. So there are certain words, you know, that probe and just why can't you say he's a great American? Okay. He was a great, Obama was a great American president. You know, that's the only honor. If you feel like giving him one, being a European American, give him that honor, that he was a good president. Maybe he wasn't good to you. Maybe he wasn't good to some others, but just say he was a good president. Because I've always felt like there was some goodness in most men. There was some goodness in most men. But men have different ideas and they try and transport them onto others. And that either to bring a reaction of wealth or anger. See, because you got to make something, you know, to have something. You know, no man can make money on his own. He's got to have somebody working for him. Okay. See, once you get people working for you, get the ball moved, then it's easy. But if you turn everybody off, ain't nobody going to want to work for you. So you, first of all, have to enlighten people to do something for you because we can't beat and whip them anymore. That's where the African American was just so downgraded and so confused about his own identity. And once you get a person so confused about their own identity, they lose their self-worth. When you lose your self-worth, you lose your composure. Your composure to do great things. You know, how can you go to work every day if somebody's hitting you with a lash? You can't think about being this or being that if you got to worry about being beaten to death. So without those pressures, now we should be better African Americans, but we still have pressures that have came forward in other forms. Some of them they call help. Well, when we look at the welfare system, how much help do you get when you take a European American? You give them, say, an allowance of food stamps of $500 a month. You give the same African American family $200 a month. You see the fairness in that. When someone can get more than you get, but they're still an American citizen. And we say things are equal here. Healthcare. When you're denied healthcare and someone else can go in the hospital and get healthcare, and they look for resources, whereas they may not look for resources for you, because this is just another African American coming in here, just want to lay around on the system, want to claim disability and don't want to go to work. You see what I'm saying? That goes on in a lot of doctors, minds, but yet and still a person can come in there basically with a crooked finger and say, I can't work. And they're European American and they get all the benefits they want. So things are not fair in America because we're judged differently. When a police officer gets out of the car, is in none of their training to go ahead and pull their weapon and start shooting at you. There's no book I've ever seen in any police department to take that weapon out of his holster and start shooting away. The Buffalo shooter, you notice when he came out the grocery store and then the cops had him, they walked him nicely to the car and put him in. Okay. No hail of gunfire, no 30 officers, just peddling bullets into him left and right because of the shooting he had caused. That's what we have to realize, that we are treated differently. And that treatment started during slavery. Once we got here after 1619, that's when it started. Because in South America, for 200 years, slaves have been brought there from the 14th century. So for 200 years before they got here in America, they were already dealing with slavery in South America. But see, a lot of those slaves were being set free. After 25 years of work, 10 years of work, 15 years of work, they let them go. They didn't have to work the rest of their lives in bondage. And people don't realize that. When you look at the Brazilians, when you look at the Argentinas, the Venezuelans, the Mexicans, there were more slaves that went to South America than North America. North America was getting slaves from South America because they already had been broken. And it was easier to even teach them when they got here. My great-grandfather's Barbados. Okay. So when we look at how certain things happen during that time, and slavery in Germany and England and France and all was being abolished, but the United States was looking at to keep you in bondage your whole life, and not only you, but your children. Not only you. See, in this country, it's totally different. They just didn't want you for the rest of your life, 80, 90 years old, but they wanted your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren. The United States still wants to hold the African-American population in bondage and slavery today. So that's why it takes so much to convince Congress that we deserve to be set free, because we're not totally free in this country. The laws have not truly set us free.
Wow.